the most terrifying movies are the ones that are inspired by true events, right? Like The Conjuring or A Haunting in Connecticut. But those are modern and familiar. I'd like to take you back a few years and talk to you about the grandfather of horror, Ed Gein. So who is Ed Gein? What did he inspire, and why are people obsessed with horror? After researching many articles, watching Ed Gein, The Butcher of Plainfield, and reading the A to Z Encyclopedia of Serial Killers, I can tell you about the who, the what, and the why. So, who is Ed Gein? The story starts in the small town of Plainfield, Wisconsin. Edward Theodore Gein was born in 1906 to his mother Augusta and his father George. He had an older brother Henry, who he looked up to, and Ed idolized his mother. It was not the acceptable version of idolizing someone. She was an unfeigned Lutheran, very strict in her beliefs. She hated her husband George, but she couldn't divorce him because she was very, very religious, and it would totally ruin everything. She did not hold back on expressing her religious beliefs to both of her children. She would tell them the gruesome stories from the Old Testament for hours upon hours every night, and told her children that every woman in the world was a prostitute except for herself. So in her boys' eyes, she's the only woman that they could, have. So keep that in mind. So as the boys grew older and they attended school, Ed Gein, he was bullied a lot, but he was really good at reading. So that's what he had for him. But he was bullied terribly, and his brother grew away from his mother's teachings. He learned that there's more to life than the Lutheran way, and he did not accept anything that she said. So he began to speak negatively about his mother around Ed, and Ed did not like that. So even though Ed would try his hardest to please his mother, she would beat both of the boys because she was never happy with anything they did. And as a result of their location in the country on a farm, Ed and Henry only had each other for company. Ed's father George died in 1940, and 4 years later there was a brush fire that burned close to their farm. So both of the boys went out to take care of it, and once night fell, the authorities finally showed up. Ed said that his brother was missing. So they had a search party go out and look for him. And Ed led them directly to his brother, who was dead on the ground around no fire. There was no sign of fire around him, and he had bruises on his head. But the coroner ruled it as asphyxiation, just to save some trouble. So a year later, Edward's mother died. So Edward is now completely alone. He lost everyone. But this was just the beginning. He boarded up his mother's room to keep as a sort of shrine, and he began robbing graves with the help of one of his friends named Gus. That's weird. So they would raid the local cemetery hours after the bodies were buried, after the funeral. And once his friend could no longer help him and he was sent to a home, Ed began to kill people because he couldn't rob a grave by himself. He only confessed to 9 grave robberies and the murders of Mary Hogan and Bernice Warden, but was believed to have killed more, and every one of his victims were women. So he was obsessed with his mother, and he wanted to make a bodysuit as a woman. He wanted a sex change. So he would remove the skin to use for various things. These are many of them. They're awful. Sorry for that. So this ranged from bowls made from human skulls to masks of human skin. And when he was questioned, Ed said he felt like he was in a haze while committing these crimes, but he was found not guilty for reason of insanity. So this is another list of wonderful things. So what did Ed inspire? The first movie that Ed inspired was Psycho, set in 1960. This was the beginning of the slasher craze. in the horror movie, Wonderful World. Next was Deranged, The Confessions of a Necrophile from 1974. Necrophile means it's someone who has sex with the dead. Okay. Next was the infamous Texas Chainsaw Massacre from 1974. And the man on the right is Leatherface. That's who Ed inspired. 1991 was Silence of the Lambs. And In Light of the Moon came in 2000, and it was after titled Ed Gein. It was based on a true story. And then Ed Gein, The Butcher of Plainfield, 2007. And that was one of the movies that I watched for this. Wonderful. In The Silence of the Lambs, Jane Gum, or Buffalo Bill, the man on the right, was a murderer who killed women to make himself a woman's suit, just like Ed Gein. And the man on the left was just another character who was crazy. Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Leatherface. He was the parallel to Ed's obsession with human skin and nasty. And Norman Bates from the movie Psycho in 1960. More familiar to you would be Norman Bates from Bates Motel, one of my favorite TV shows. And the parallel here is that Norman was very close to his mom, loved his mother too much. He didn't have any friends. He was good in school, and his brother strayed and talked negatively about his mom, and then they killed him. So, what is with the obsession? I'd like to recall your reactions from those pictures. You were gawking, and you were like, "Oh my gosh!" And you didn't look away, but you could have. Even though I put pictures up, and you're supposed to look at them because I'm presenting, but you could have looked away. That's the same thing that happens when you're on the highway and you drive past an accident. You stare, and you don't stop until you can't see it anymore. Or people search for the excitement and thrill, just like on roller coasters. You want that close encounter with death without dying. So I'm not saying roller coasters are going to kill you, but they feel like they will. So we as a society want to walk into the unknown while knowing we are completely safe. So Ed had a strange and rough childhood, and his obsession turned into the beginning of the slasher movie era that people just still can't get enough of. Edward Theodore Gein is the grandfather of horror.